both the video and the audio.
Oh, okay.
With the camera. And I was kind of on edge about it. So I don't know if I didn't push this hard enough. I remember pushing it.
I saw you push it.
But it didn't come up.
It's okay.
But the video did, but the audio wasn't good, so it's kind of hard to use that, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, we had a go at this before, so we should be pretty good at it now.
It was a dress rehearsal.
And I appreciate you doing that, because I can't tell you, like, I figured it out about 10 minutes out of here. Like, I get in the truck and I'm making sure my stuff's good, you know, and I'm like, there's no audio.
Oh no.
And I'm
That's
sitting
a
in
bad
the parking
feeling.
lot, and I'm trying to think, how do I explain this to this lady who I just took an hour of her time?
Wait, you were still in the parking lot?
Yes.
Well, we could have just redone it right then.
I was terrified. I was like, I can't believe I've done this. I was nervous about it, you know, and I thought, maybe I can pull the audio from the video.
Oh no.
So I got home and put it in the computer so I could really see it, you know, and you can hear it, but you can't hear it.
Right. No, this will be much better.
It'll be
I hope it's a better interview. I hope it's not worse.
No, you did great last time, and I was thinking when I was walking up here that I'm thankful I never had legal action. That I've had to walk into a lawyer's office. It's a little intimidating. Is
it?
Yeah, because it's obviously a nice building, and there's guys in suits everywhere, and really nice Lexus cars and BMWs
well, it's not mine.
outside. Somebody's got a nice
truck.
Corvette. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have seen I don't know who drives the Corvette.
Pretty sharp.
Yeah.
So it's kind of legal eagles walking in here.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
You don't think it's intimidating. But you do it every day.
I do it every day. That's right.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think lawyers are intimidating maybe because they see how they're portrayed on TV and they think, oh, lawyers are like this. But lawyers are all different types, shapes, ages, genders of people. So you can pretty much find a lawyer to match your personality and your comfort level.
Well, I sat on my first jury trial.
Oh, yeah?
I think I might have mentioned this to you last time, but that was an experience. You know, I think you get this picture in your head that, what was that, L.A. Law? Is that a show, L.A. Law?
Sure.
Something like
maybe. I try not to watch lawyer shows because I see it all. I live in one, so.
Right. So you see all these and you wonder, like, what's the truth?
Right.
But then when you're sitting there, and of course I did not want to get selected. I was trying to give every answer possible to not get selected, and I thought, hey, there's no way they're going to pick me.
Sure.
Then they picked me. So I had to sit there for 2 or 3 days or something, and you know, if you have the time, it's a great experience because you see a side of society that maybe you didn't know existed.
Right.
You know, so but to see the lawyers at work, but the DA especially, he was really convincing, really good, and it was a crazy situation. It was like, the guy didn't die. 2 guys got in this fight. One pulls out a box blade.
Oh.
And cuts the other one. But he didn't die, but he was like rushed to the ER, of course, life flighted. He survived. But then it was all this stuff, you know. And the worst part was sitting in the back trying to discuss with, 9 people, 8 people, 10 people, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Would have been probably 11 plus you.
Might have been 12, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was split right down the middle.
Oh, wow.
5 and 5 or 6 and 6 or whatever.
How'd you break the tie?
It was hung jury.
You didn't break it?
Mm-mm.
Oh.
Everybody stood their ground.
Wow.
I think there might have been a few, like we came out and the judge was like, get back in there. And then there might have been a few moved, but it was no one was going to go all the way. I think.
Wow.
But it was interesting. So you guys live an interesting life.
We do, and you know that what you're talking about obviously is the criminal side of it, and I stay far away from any criminal cases or anything like that. I don't do. So I do all the civil cases, but we also have civil jury trials, and those are also intimidating and scary because you don't know what a jury is going to do, and it's always best to settle beforehand if you can. It's cheaper for everybody, and you're not rolling the dice with a jury.
Are you ever involved in like jury selection? Do you have to background all that? And do all that?
Yeah. So you can, there's lots of different things you can do for jury selection. I mean, at a basic level, you get the jury list, depending on what county you're in, you get the jury list a certain number of days before trial, and you get your team on it. You can look at their social media. You can kind of get an
Really?
idea for their, leanings, their belief system, things like that. That's kind of a basic level, but they have consultants who will come in and, just like on TV, they'll have consultants come in and tell you what jurors are going to be the best and do much more detailed background checks, and will even help you during jury selection to select jurors based on, their observations of the jury pool. It's kind of crazy.
That's interesting.
I don't deal with any of that.
When we get off, when we stop this, I want to know, like, what are the 3 answers I need to not get
selected? It would depend on the case, but I might be able to give you some pointers later.
Because I was sweating bullets. I'll tell you another one, then we'll get into what we're here for, but I got called up for a murder trial.
Oh.
This was in 18, end of 18.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird because you walk in the jury or the courtroom on selection day, and you know why you're there.
Right.
And there's this guy sitting there who obviously is the one on trial.
Right.
Like, it's pretty clear. And anyway, they get through all this stuff, and then finally the judge says, I'll just be real direct with you. There's 150 of us in there, 100 or something. He said, whoever gets picked today, you will get on a bus out back, and we're shipping you to Memphis and sequestering you in a hotel for however long.
Oh, my gosh.
So it's kind of like saying goodbye to your wife and kids because you're getting on a, and I was like sweating, like, oh my gosh, I cannot put my life on hold for this.
Oh,
Thank
my gosh.
the good Lord I did not get picked. But yeah,
That's scary.
There was a guy I worked with who did get picked, and they were in somewhere around Memphis for 10 or 12 days.
Oh, my gosh.
No phones, in a hotel room, no nothing.
That's miserable.
Horrible.
Wow. And they probably got paid. I don't know how much they pay there, but I think in Alabama jurors get $10 a day.
Yeah, I was going to say probably $7.
Yeah. Oh, cheaper. Yeah.
Right. Hey, but we're here today to talk equine law or talk law. You are one of the topics that we have not even discussed on this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which I appreciate you being willing to do it because it's not too many people out there that I know of that specialize in equine law.
There aren't that many, really.
And you're the one I know, and I know you because of another friend of ours. But not just, we're gonna get to all the background stuff. You're a horse person too, and you're not just a lawyer, but you combine a hobby and a profession to make more of a profession, I guess, in equine law. But tell us just kind of how did you get started in law, and like I know you deal with conservation law and equine law. What are some of the kind of the things that you're kind of wrapped up and involved in?
Yeah, well, I took a kind of unusual path to law school. I started out thinking I would go to either vet school or maybe even med school, so I was a biology major. And while I started studying that at Alabama, I really got into more of the plant and ecology type biology. I guess the animals go with that too. It's not just plant. I had a specific plant course in mind that was really a fun class. But then I started thinking, well, what can I do with this? I'm going to give away how old I am, but that was back in the day when environmental science was kind of a new thing and wasn't really offered as a major. So I kind of made my own, and then I thought, I could go to law school and maybe make a career out of, studying the environment and, environmental regulation, enforcement, that type of thing. So that's what I ended up doing. And along the way, in the process of doing that, I did a little bit of litigation starting out and then turned into a lot of litigation, just general. But in the course of doing that, I had a client call and they had an issue with a horse. And that client was referred to me in the firm because I was the horse person. And I was able to help this client out. And I thought, hey, maybe I can add a little equine law experience.
So the only reason you were picked was because everybody else knew
Nothing.
You deal with horses on the side, and so
Yes.
let's just pawn it off on her.
Yeah, give it to Jane. She knows horses. We don't know what to do with this case. So it just kind of happened like that. I had never really thought of doing equine law and didn't really know it was a thing until I helped this client and I started looking into it. And there are definitely lawyers out there who make a living doing only equine law in some of the more equine-centric states like Florida, Kentucky. But, in a state like Alabama, you do have a good number of people who have equine issues that come up. And I get a good number of calls about it. So it's kind of a fun side gig to, my general environmental and litigation practice is to help some equine clients when they come in.
What's the percentage of your dealings?
Oh gosh, right. It varies. Right now, I'd say maybe about 10% is equine, which doesn't sound like much, but it's good. I think if I did equine full time, you get kind of wrapped up in the emotions and the drama of that. That's something that's a little bit different than doing just your general litigation cases or environmental law cases. Because, horses to people, sometimes they're pets, sometimes they're children, sometimes they're just money makers. It just depends on the client. But there's usually a lot of emotion attached to the equine cases. So, you have to, it takes a little bit more of your emotional energy too to help your clients in those cases.
So we're going to put this question to bed because this is the question I've asked every animal science person that's come through our department, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, fourth-year vet students that come through our barn. I say, and I try to play dumb and stay on the fence, but are horses pets or livestock?
Well, I guess it depends on who you ask. For me, they're pets. But I guess for a business client, they would be considered, they would consider them livestock, most likely.
In terms of just law, like you're built around liability, are they, can you claim, is there a difference in a pet and a livestock animal?
That's a good question. No, not really. In Alabama, they are considered livestock. So from a purely legal perspective, livestock. But, you ask me, you ask some of my friends, our answer would be, oh, no, they're pets.
Sure. And that's exactly the answer I always get. They're pet. A lot of times people feel strongly one way or the other. And it's usually pets. And I tell them, they're both got to pet them and they love me. And I get it. I totally understand. People make pets out of rocks.
Sure.
So you can make anybody who makes a pet out of a snake is a different character in my book. But I guess we can make anything a pet if we really worked at it hard enough. And horses, I think they would fit the mold. Is there any advantage, though, is there any advantage to the animal scientist, the production livestock agriculture person? Is there any advantage legally minded that we put the label on them as pets or as livestock? Is there any advantage to that?
No, not really. So livestock is, which horses are included in under the legal definition, they are handled under basically the Uniform Commercial Code that most states have adopted. So they are considered a good, quote unquote good, which is something that's movable at the time of exchange, and obviously a horse is movable. So no, but you do have special protections under the UCC for livestock. So the sale of livestock, the lease of livestock, that's all included under the UCC, and there's about 1 million different provisions. So if you ask me about any, I won't be able to tell you off the top of my head. I'm just going to give you a heads up. You have to look at them on a very case-specific basis.
So we move horses into this livestock category, and again, in my limited understanding of equine law, I've paid a little bit of attention to it because I have to teach some of this kind of stuff in some of my classes, but in my book, it seems like we classify them as livestock, and therefore we reap the benefits, for lack of a better term, from things like different states, but equine limited liability laws.
Correct.
Is there one for pets at all? Like your dog bites someone, is there a limited canine liability law?
No, it varies state by state on what, like, for instance, a dog bite case will be handled differently in different states.
So under the protection of a equine limited liability law, what does that afford an equine owner?
Well, there are different provisions. So most states have adopted that. It's not well, I guess it is technically a Uniform Equine Activities Liability Act, and I think the American Horse Council put out the initial draft of that, and most states adopted it. But what it does is it basically is a law that says, hey, everybody, horses are dangerous animals, and there's a certain amount of risk associated when you participate in an equine activity. And we're going to go ahead and put out there that if you participate in an equine activity, that you're accepting these risks. And they did that because when you have people who don't understand horses, or different states having different equine laws, you just have a lot of different liability exposure. And so what that does is it allows people to be able to have equine activities at their farm or sponsor an equine activity, having some minimal level of protection against liability. So it encourages equine businesses to operate. Without that law, I think that it would be very difficult, given how lawyers are and how we like to sue people, to, have an equine activity like a horse show or a trail ride or something like that. So that law really does protect people at a certain level from liability.
Because as much as we all love horses that deal in the horse business, we're dealing with a 1,200-pound animal that's got a mind of its own.
Yep.
And most horses are innately good, too, as far as wanting to do what we ask them to do, because they don't have to.
Sure, they don't.
But at the same time, right, they don't have to, or they can decide at some point not to. So, it's just with riding horses, it can go south really quick.
It can.
Then you put 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 horses, depending on the event, all in the same room, and then it gets really hairy.
Right.
But does each state have some form of an equine limit? I think some states might call it a livestock limited liability law.
They might, yeah. Each state basically has some form of that Uniform Liability Act. In Alabama, it's the Alabama Equine Activities Liability Act. And it provides a base protection, and you want to take advantage of that act if you can. And one of the things that I see people not doing that's so easy to do, that you need if you want some of the extra protections afforded under that, is those white signs that you see around that say, warning, you are entering into a equine activities area. And it doesn't say exactly that, but some form of that. And it seems a little excessive, but
so they must be posted.
They have to be posted. And it says you can die from this, things like that. It's funny. I actually have one up at my farm, which is where I live also. And so when you come in the driveway, it's right there on the right. And I had some of the lawyers from the firm come over for dinner, and they all laughed at me, and they said, it's obvious a lawyer lives here. You got that warning sign out front. And I said, I've got to protect myself. What if one of you walks out and my horse bites your hand? None of mine would, but you never know. What if you get kicked? Right. What if something happens? So, I have to protect myself too, but that little white sign is kind of a intro step. You got to put that up there and warn people that they are entering into an area where there are horses, if you want to fall within the protections of that act.
That's a good point. So it's got to be posted. It can't just be assumed that, hey, I heard it this one time on a podcast, we live under these liability laws, so no big deal. You've got to have it posted.
Get that signed.
And you bring up a really good point. I can tell you 2 times in my life that I remember, it's probably been a lot more, 2 times I've been kicked. And both times is by someone else's horse who told me less than 10 seconds before that he doesn't kick.
Oh gosh,
that's when they kick. What it is where you're going to walk behind him, and the owner looks at you and goes, "Go ahead." He doesn't kick, and you're like, "Okay."
Yeah.
And then whack.
Now he does.
Kicked. Man, yeah. So to this day, if somebody says, "Go ahead," I'm like, "No way."
No, thank you.
You go ahead and push him over. I'm not walking behind him. Yeah. So I think that's a great point that everyone listening to this is what we're here for, is to try to educate people. And if you just assume that, every 50 states has this thing,
right?
No big deal. But we need to post it in places that we're giving lessons, post it in our barns, post it in our arenas, if we're running a coliseum or an event center, it needs to be posted there. And if you watch closely, I think as horse people, we probably walk by them all the time and don't notice.
We do.
They're in the offices when you go sign up a lot of times and stuff. It uses this really weird terminology for the layperson, things like inherent risk and all this stuff. Can you give some credence to what that exactly means and why this thing is called a limited liability? It's not foolproof.
No, it definitely is not foolproof. Well, inherent risk, like we were talking about earlier, it basically is just an acknowledgement that horses are dangerous. They're big creatures. Like you said, they don't always do what you say, and they can hurt people. And so if you are voluntarily going to participate in a horse-related activity, you're probably going to get hurt at some point. And so they just want to point that out. So that's what that means.
And you're assuming the risk.
You are assuming it.
On.
Yes, you're saying, I recognize that you have warned me that this is dangerous. I might die. I'm willingly diving into this, as horse people do.
Right, right.
The limited part is a very good point. It does not shield you completely from any and all liability, because there are certain things that you just can't do. Like you can't have a bunch of kids over for a birthday party and use a horse that bites and kicks that is a biter and a kicker, and that one kid gets hurt. That act is not going to protect you in that situation. If you have knowledge of a dangerous situation involving a horse and yet you expose somebody intentionally, or even just grossly negligently. I mean, if you should have known that was an issue, you're probably going to fall outside of the protections of that act. So, you got to use common sense. You got to use horse sense. If you are taking all the precautions that a reasonable person would take, then that act should protect you from 99% of the things that are going to happen with a horse.
We grew up in an era, you and I, I'm sure, where our parents, I can tell you my background. My dad was like, if there was a problem, his answer, but it'd be all right. You know what I mean? It'd be all right. And you just rolled on with it.
Rub some dirt on it.
Exactly. And so you just bring up a thought in my head that, when I was a kid, my dad's a horse trainer, so we had horses everywhere. But if my friends came over, city kids, we just they all wanted to ride.
Oh, yeah.
So we just jumped on and went, and thankfully no one got hurt. But this point that you're making is that as horse owners, we have to make a conscious effort to say, we have somehow vetted this person, and they seem like they could handle a horse and be okay to ride. So I'd let them ride my horse, who I know to be pretty docile and gentle.
Right.
But then something bad happened. So that's where this law would maybe kick in and give some protection.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
What about is there anything else like equipment involved or property or anything like that the owner needs to be aware of?
Oh, absolutely. So those are two very good points. So equipment-wise, you can imagine a situation where maybe somebody's doing trail rides, for hire, and they're just throwing the same saddle and bridle on the horse daily. Maybe they're not cleaning it properly. Maybe the leather is dried and cracked. If there's a tack failure due to their negligence in maintaining the tack, that's not going to be protected. So they would likely be found liable under those situations. There's probably a million different scenarios you can imagine. But again, that falls within what is a reasonable person supposed to do? Well, you're supposed to take care of your things and make sure they're in good working order. So if you're doing that, you're probably going to be okay. Property-wise, that's another thing unto itself, really. If you are going to tell your friend, hey, let's go galloping through this pasture where I know there are a lot of gopher holes, probably not a good idea. But, if you happen to step in a gopher hole, or your horse does actually, and something happens and you get hurt, if it's one gopher hole in a big pasture and your friend didn't know that it was there, you're probably okay. So you can see it's kind of a spectrum of... There's
so many scenarios. I got a scenario. I was at a horse show this weekend, and somebody was showing a horse. They put a red ribbon in the tail.
Yep.
So they're a known kicker.
Right.
So where would something like that fall into? If you run up behind somebody and they were doing what they could do, but maybe should they be showing that horse? I don't know.
That's a good question. I mean, I feel like if you've got a red ribbon in the tail, and in the horse world, we all know that means this horse is a kicker, and keep your distance. I feel like you've been fairly warned. So if it's your responsibility to steer clear of that horse. So
Okay.
I think that'd still be okay.
Okay, good. And then this makes me think about some other things too. As horse owners, a lot of times, especially where I grew up in Oklahoma and sometimes in Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, it's probably all the same. We enjoy horses, so we buy the horse, or we go get our first horse, and then somebody wants to ride. Maybe we get somewhere where we understand what we're doing, and so we start giving lessons to people, or they want to pay us, and then how this evolves.
Yes.
It just evolves.
Sure.
There are things that people who are giving lessons and taking and earning some form of income need to do in order to help themselves, other than just posting signs and being conscious about horses that we put people on, or we use lesson horses probably. And is there other things that we can do too, maybe contractually?
Yes, absolutely. So there's really 2 extra things that I recommend that my clients do, in addition to making sure that you're acting reasonable and can fall under that Equine Activities Liability Act with your sign. One, we'll get to the contract in a minute, but I want to just mention that really everybody needs to have an equine insurance policy on their property. I have one for mine just because I have various visitors at my farm from time to time. I don't host events or anything like that. It's just me and my personal horses. But I do have people that come over and want to pat the horses and feed them carrots and such. So I've got a little policy.
Is that separate from a homeowner's?
It is, yes,
Okay.
definitely. So your homeowners is most likely not going to cover anything equine related. But, I think it's a couple $100s a year just to have that little policy that covers, if your horse has hurt somebody, and it's worth it. So I would highly recommend doing that. And there are a bunch of different carriers you can look at. A lot of them sponsor horse shows, which is why they sponsor them,
Sure,
to get your
yeah.
business. So you can contact those. But going back to the contract, yes, absolutely. Depending on what you're doing, if you're just giving lessons, you probably just need a general release form, which is really just another acknowledgement of the risk that the person is entering into by riding one of your horses. And it can have some other things attached to it, like, things like if you authorize this, if the person riding authorizes you to get them emergency care, things like that. So a contract, really release type document is really, I would not do anything without that, honestly. You kind of want the trifecta. You want your sign, you want your insurance, and you want some sort of general release.
So if you've got an 8-year-old having a birthday party at your house, when mom drops off the other friends, you got to have them sign the waiver.
Yeah, then they're going to know a
here.
lawyer's been involved. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And as awkward as that may be, and as awkward as it sounds, I think it's probably more and more common these days. I mean, if you take your kid to a trampoline park for a birthday party, you're signing something like that.
Yeah.
So, if you want a pony at the birthday party, go ahead, just make sure it doesn't bite or kick, and get the parents to sign a release.
It's so different than we were kids, because we rode 3-wheelers, which probably no one listening knows what a 3-wheeler is, but so dangerous, whipping around the pastures on 4-wheelers and 3-wheelers and mopeds and riding horses bareback.
Oh yeah. And we all survived.
And we somehow, most of us survived.
And nobody got sued.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened.
I don't know. Maybe that's why everybody gets sued now, is because we look back and think, man, I could have sued them.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Even now, I watched this the other day. Somebody who took their family on campus at State, and they were taking their kids to ride bikes. Mm-hmm. And the mom and dad and 2 kids. And both kids had on helmets, elbow pads, knee pads.
Oh, wow.
They were ready for whatever come their way. And I thought, man, the pedals on our bikes skinned your shins down to the bone, and you had no padding, and most of them had no brakes. It's just a different world we live in.
It definitely is.
And as the casual, especially casual horse owners, we probably need to be kind of aware of what those liability laws are and how we could be. I think it's a lot of times these things happen out of, I don't know, negligence. Maybe that's not the right term to use, but I didn't mean to do it.
Right.
I didn't mean for that to happen, or didn't want that to happen, of course. but we have these horses in unsecured fences, or they get out, run over somebody's kid, or, man, you think about it, they get out on the highway and somebody hits them with a car.
Well, there's actually a law in Alabama about that, about, if your horse gets out on the highway, basically, and this is a big paraphrasing of the law, but basically if the horse gets out there, you're not liable for it.
Oh, really?
If you put it out there, like if you tied it up out there, you absolutely you are. Yeah, exactly. But if it just escapes your fence, and there's again a million different caveats. You've got local ordinances, things like that you would need to look at too. But in general, if the horse gets out, in Alabama at least,
Well, the only reason that's in place is because it's happened so much. Finally, somebody
probably,
had to.
I don't know what it is in Mississippi.
I don't either.
I need to look
that
up.
I do too. I mean, I've never even heard of a law like that, but that's interesting. The other thing I was going to ask you too is about. I'm just curious, not to get off in the weeds, but what are some things that have you dealt with clients that maybe you said in your head, did not see that coming? Like, how did this person get into this situation? Or maybe they took the right steps and it's just one of those weird things.
Yeah. The one that always comes to mind when I get asked a similar question like that, or what is the strangest equine case? I had one where, and I'll have to be careful not to reveal any client confidences as I tell the story, but she was participating in a horse show. And it was a discipline in which all the riders were in the arena at the same time. And my client, was riding a older school horse. Actually, I think he was a pony even. And there was an elderly gentleman who was riding a very fractious 3-year-old in the same class. And the judge asked everybody to pick up a canter, and my client starts cantering, as does everyone else, except for this gentleman's 3-year-old that he couldn't get to canter. So he's trying to get the horse to canter, and as he's doing that, his horse swings his hind end into the middle of the arena. Well, my client just happened to be at the right place at the wrong time, and her horse clipped the back end of the gentleman's horse. And of course, when something hits the back of a 3-year-old horse, they'd like to buck and take off. And this man fell off and had a concussion, was not wearing a helmet, and had to go to the hospital. So very sad, but I think he was fine. But he ended up suing my client for rear-ending him at a horse show, like in a car wreck. And
that was the title of this.
Yeah, well,
premise.
It was, whatever language you would use when you sue somebody in a car wreck, that's what his lawyer used. And, obviously that stems from his lawyer not understanding how horses work. You don't steer them like a car. They don't always go where you want them to go. And so it was really interesting. Her insurance company was defending her in that case, but they hired me as kind of the horse person on call as, hey, can you help us understand these equine laws? Because this is something that a general insurance counsel is not going to understand. So I came in and I assisted with that, and we educated the judge on, hey, horses aren't cars, if this is how horses act. And, nobody was being unreasonable. It was just an accident, and accidents happen. It wasn't Jane's client's fault. So and we did get it thrown out, thank goodness. But unfortunately, my client did have to spend a little bit of money to defend that. But, she didn't have any liability. But, when people sue over things like that, that's kind of what gives lawyers a bad name, because any horse person is going to know that's not something that you can control.
This has to be kind of a worrisome thing, though, because if you're going into a court of law with a judge who doesn't understand this kind of stuff, and you've got, I'm sure, a certain amount of time to educate and hope that he grasps, I'm sure that could be a little bit dicey to...
It is. And sometimes you luck out and you'll get a judge that has horse experience. I recently had a case that had an ownership dispute, and the other lawyer was trying to say, well, we have the title to the horse, therefore we own the horse. And my client actually had the horse. And I'm like, no, we have the horse, we own the horse. And, a horse isn't titled like a car. It's, the title is the registration for their breed or discipline or whatever. And the judge understood that. And the judge looked at it and said, no, that a horse's registration papers aren't necessary to transfer title like you would a car. So
in most states, it's cash in hand, isn't it? Once money's transferred.
Yeah, it's just like a regular good under the UCC. Yeah,
right.
So
because so many times, man, there's so many times people don't transfer papers as far as the breed associations. I see this all the time. People 3 years later go to sell the horse, they still haven't transferred it.
Yes, exactly.
And then they want to, go back and do it quickly. But I think, again, I don't know state by state, but I know Texas was what they call it, cash in hand or something like that. Once the money has changed hands, ownership has changed.
Yes, exactly.
You bring up something else I just want your opinion about.
Okay.
And then we're going to leak into your background because you have a hunter, jumper, English dressage background.
I do, yes.
And so you made the comment, which most English people would make, and that is the guy wasn't wearing a helmet.
Right.
So what do you think are, from your experiences, the importance and value of wearing a helmet with equine riding?
I know this is a very controversial topic, and it is very discipline dependent. So I currently am a dressage rider and compete in dressage, and helmets are required at all shows. And at the upper levels, the international levels, they have only recently required helmets in dressage. But I personally always wear a helmet at home. I have friends who have had traumatic head injuries, and not from a horse that was doing anything wrong. I mean, one, she was actually an Olympic rider, and she was just trotting a horse at home and wasn't wearing a helmet, and the horse didn't do anything wrong. He just stumbled, and she fell, and then she was in a coma for, months. And, her riding career's over. Could that have been prevented with a helmet? Maybe. I mean, you never know. You can get a head injury with a helmet, of course, but I know a lot of the Western riders think you look dumb with a helmet, and a lot of people are like, I don't think my hair looks good when I take the helmet off, and I'm like, your hair's not going to look good in the hospital either.
Well, you're right. It's a controversy, and the reason I wasn't bringing it up to put you on the spot.
No, it's fine.
I'll tell you where I'm at on this. I was hardcore as a Western rider, growing up with a cowboy dad and horse trainer. Like, I ain't wearing no helmet.
Right.
Not happening. When I came to Mississippi, that topic was very much on the table and being kind of pushed on the 4-H side of things. And there was a group that obviously did not want the helmets. And there was a group that saw and I would say they were probably the minority at the time, saw the value in using them. Administration decided that at the 4-H level they were going to be required, and so we moved into that caveat. It was the right decision. It was the right decision, and probably a lot of people that go, how dare you? But when you see what I see at the show level, we got to protect these kids, and a lot of them don't have control or don't have the ability to stay on the horse. And even those that do, like you said, it could be a weird fall or way they fall, just oddly enough. I'll tell you the weirdest thing I ever saw. I was teaching a 2-year-old training class, saw this experienced rider get on, a student of mine. She gets on, horse bucks her off. Not bad at all. I'm standing 20 feet from her, watch the whole thing. She gets up, stands up, dusts herself off. Her name, I won't say her name. But I said, hey, you all right? We're laughing.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, I'm fine. She's dusting herself off. And I was just being funny and said, hey, what's your dad's name? And she stopped like a statue. I was dazed looking, and she's looking around. And I could see the wheels spinning, but there was nothing coming. She starts crying.
Oh, no.
She's like, I don't know. She wound up taking her to the emergency room. She had a concussion.
Wow.
And it was the most soft landing, non-problematic looking buck off I've ever seen. And here's the other thing. People say all the time, well, I've never been bucked off. Well, if you haven't been bucked off, you have not ridden enough. It's
True.
going to happen.
It's going to happen.
I was lucky enough to never have hit my head.
Yes.
Because I've never worn a helmet. And, you want to know what the barn name of my first show horse was?
Oh, no. Lightning?
Runny Bucky.
You're kidding. His name was actually Runny Bucky?
Yeah, because if he wasn't bucking, he was running, and if he wasn't running,
That's hysterical.
Runny Bucky. But if you got her shown, she was pretty nice.
Wow.
But
And you rode Runny Bucky without a helmet.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, she bucked me off quite a few times.
You got lucky.
But I did what I was, hardcore cowboy in perspective, and then I was doing a night clinic. I don't remember where I was in Mississippi, and this woman in the audience where I didn't preach don't wear helmets. I didn't preach wear helmets. I just preached the facts. You're right. There's a lot of, especially now with football and all this stuff, aware of traumatic head injuries. The statistics are there, and when you read them, you'll probably put a helmet on.
Yeah.
So I'm just presenting the facts. I'm not saying do this or don't do this. I'm just presenting the facts. And this woman says, "Do you wear a helmet?" I said, "No, ma'am, I do not." She said, "Why not?" I said, "I'm stubborn." And she says, "Will you make your little girl?"
Oh.
And I was like, yeah. At this time, she was like 2.
Yeah.
Know? But I was like, yeah, that's my little girl. I'm going to make sure I take care of her.
Yeah.
So, I think your perspectives can change. I don't mean to trap you with that question, but
no.
It's a good perspective question because a whole lot of us out there, I'm not wearing a helmet. And there's a whole lot of people that I wouldn't get on without one.
Yeah, so. I'm in that camp. And, I think it is a distinction between adults and children. If you're an adult and you want to make your own decisions, that's fine, but a kid doesn't know. A kid's going to ride a bike without a helmet. I rode bikes without a helmet. I rode horses without a helmet until I was in my 20s, because back then, like you were saying, nobody really wore them. You just hopped on bareback and ran around.
Well, it's like seatbelt issue now.
Exactly.
But no one gets in there. I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Just put my seatbelt on.
Yeah.
But
it's
back
not
in
a big
the
deal.
70s.
Yeah. No, you're bouncing around the back
Right.
seat.
Yeah, jumping over the seats.
Or if you have the station wagon, you're in the back,
right, looking out the back window.
Trying to, poke your sister through the,
Yeah, but now it's just common practice.
Yeah.
So I don't want to belabor what we're talking about and get off on a goose chase, but I do think that's an interesting topic and probably one of, everybody can make, that's what I do think too, is that everyone can make their decision.
Right.
They can make their own choice. But just to kind of put all this back into perspective, if you had to put a list together for a horse owner, and this is interesting timing because I'm doing a horse owners workshop right now.
Oh, cool.
Four Saturdays in a row, last month, this month, and then January, February, and we're talking about what does horse ownership entail in terms of responsibility and costs and this and that. So let's fast forward that we bought the horse, we got the place to put him, we're having a good time, we're riding, and what are the top 2 to 3 things you might say would be your advice from a legal standpoint for the new horse owner?
For the new horse owner that is keeping a horse at home, and are they a professional or are they just a horse owner for themselves?
What defines them? What defines the difference?
So if you're a professional and you're making money off of it, then you're going to have more people coming onto your property and participating. If you're using your horse for lessons, you do have a little more exposure liability-wise. So I would really just go back to what we were talking about earlier, the same 3 things. You need your pretty white sign, and you need it everywhere. Put it at the entrance of your farm, put it inside the barn, and I'd put one next to the arena. And one thing I'll mention about that, because this did come up in a case, I would take a picture of your signs once a year and just keep those pictures on your phone, or you print them out, store them wherever. But as long as they have a timestamp on it, because you want to be able to show that at any given time you had those signs up. Because I did have one case where they were arguing, well, that sign wasn't there, but. Anyway, so definitely your sign, definitely your liability, equine liability insurance, which we talked about, is, fairly reasonable you can get. And that's for everybody, professional or just horse owner at home. Then if you're going to be doing any business things on your farm, or even if you're going to let friends come and ride your horse, I would highly recommend signing a release. If you wanted to, you could have somebody sign a release anytime they came on your property, but that kind of gets awkward. Do you have the male person sign a release?
Right.
No. But if you're going to be offering any rides on your horse, even if you're putting somebody's kid up and you're going to lead your horse around bareback, while their kid sits up there and looks cute for pictures, I'd probably put a helmet on that kid and make the parent sign a release. And you can always blame these things on your mean, overbearing lawyer. That's what I tell all my clients. You don't have to look like a big nerd. You can say, my lawyer makes me do this. And you can say that whether you have a lawyer or not. But I think anytime anybody's going to be getting on a horse, you really do need a release. You need them to sign a release.
Great. I didn't even think about that. It boils down to a lot of times he said, she said. Well, that sign wasn't there.
Exactly.
How do you prove that? That's a great perspective. This is off the wall. It can be the last question for the day. It can be from litigation standpoint, personal standpoint, biology standpoint, however you want to put it. But we all have mentors. We all have people we look up to and say, hey, that person helped me in numerous ways. What was the best piece of advice, professionally or personally, you ever received from someone who you respect as a mentor?
Oh, gosh. I've had different mentors in different aspects of my life, but I've actually been given a similar piece of advice in the horse world and in the litigation professional world. And it's basically, if you do a good job and you do things honorably and with your client's best interests at heart, or with your horse's best interests at heart, you're going to be successful. So if you're dealing with clients and you treat them with respect and you do a good job for them, you're going to get more clients because word's going to get out. If you're working with horses and you treat that horse with respect and kindness, you're going to get a lot back from that horse in return. So I would say it's a pretty basic piece of advice, but I think has served me really well.
Yeah, I think I'm sure in most businesses, if you are in it for yourself and selfish and don't make good choices, everybody finds out.
That's right.
That's a great piece of advice. If anybody listening needs equine law information, or maybe they're in a particular position that they need an equine lawyer, even if they're not in Mississippi or Alabama, I'm sure it's like everywhere else. You probably know people in California to Alaska to wherever.
Yeah.
How can people get in touch with you as far as through the law firm?
Sure. Yeah, please. The website is rosenharwood.com. It's ROSENHARWOOD.com. And you can find my contact information on there, and feel free to call or email, and happy to help.
But you're a gem. I appreciate you doing this. The second time I think was even better than the first one. So
Wonderful.
we don't have proof of the first time, but I think it went well. I appreciate your time, and
Sure.
I know you're busy, so you took time out of your busy day. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. I enjoyed it.